Hey everyone, my name is Elise Franco. Thank you so much for joining us today for our State of Innovation, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. Before we get started, just a quick reminder that we will be doing a Q&A session at the end, so drop any questions you may have for our panelists in the chat box, and we will get to those about 10 to 15 minutes toward the end of the session. I'm going to give another minute or so for people to join, and then we will get started. All right, like I said a second ago, my name is Elise Franco. I'm the staff reporter for Charlotte Inno, and welcome to Charlotte Inno's second 2021 State of Innovation event. Today's conversations will center around diversity, equity, and inclusion in Charlotte's tech ecosystem. If you do have any questions for our panel or for Charlotte Inno during the event, drop those in the chat box. We'll have that Q&A session right after the panel discussion. And before we dive into the conversation, for anybody unfamiliar with us and what we do, Inno is part of a growing network of sites. We're committed to covering and connecting local technology, startups, growth, and innovation. Charlotte Inno covers the local ecosystem with daily stories, a twice-a-week newsletter, and quarterly events. Check us out at charlotteinno.com to see what we're all about. And while you're there, sign up for The Beat, our twice-a-week newsletter. The Beat's definitely the best way for everybody to stay plugged into everything that's impacting the local innovation economy. In it, you'll get the local tech and startup news you need, analysis you won't find anywhere else, info on upcoming events, the city's best tech and innovation job opportunities, and much more, and we do it for you in a conversational manner. I first want to thank all of our sponsors, our founding partner, the City of Charlotte, supporting partners, Dual Boot Partners, Charlotte Business Resources, and our gold partners, Accenture and Entrepreneurs Organization Charlotte. Now let's get to our panelists. First up, I want to introduce Henry Rock. He's the Executive Director of City Startup Labs.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this morning. And yes, I'm Henry Rock, the founder and executive director of City Startup Labs. We've been developing entrepreneurial talent and capacity since 2014. And most recently, towards the beginning of this year, we absorbed the assets of Black Tech Interactive and Black Tech Charlotte. And happy to be here on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henry. Next, we've got Kimberly Evans, founder and CEO of startup Just Her Rideshare.
Hi, good morning, Elise. Hi, good morning, Henry. Elise, thank you so much for an opportunity to share this platform with such an amazing group of individuals. I am the founder and CEO of Just Her Rideshare, where we are a rideshare community of women drivers and riders. But we're not only driving and riding women, we're building community with them. And as a social entrepreneur, it was super important for me to create a space where women could engage and connect with one another as we support not only each other, but also our community initiatives. And I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
Wonderful, thank you, Kim. And finally, Rashawn Peak, Director of Black Tech Charlotte, Black Tech Interactive. Oh, Rashawn, I think you're still muted.
Muted.
There we go.
I just wanted you to say my name again. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here representing Black Tech Charlotte today. I am Rashawn Peak. Recently, as Henry said, we acquired the intellectual property of Black Tech, and so we've been hitting the ground running and planning and working, and just recently certified in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm happy to be here today.
Wonderful. Again, thank you all so much. And let's dive right into the conversation. My first question is, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to each of you, and how does it impact innovation?
So I'll jump right in. So not only does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean exactly what it is, but to me, it also means full transparency. It means impact, like there has to be long-lasting impact. And it also means accountability. So you can't really have real long-lasting innovation without diversity. So we know that companies that are highly diverse, we know that they report that they perform and overperform exponentially year after year, gaining new market space. when they are diverse. So I think for me, it means the benefit is value, like it brings value. And these individuals who are creative and brilliant, some of them never get an opportunity to showcase their talents in technology and many other areas because of the lack of access. So I think there has to be some full transparency in how we create these processes. And also, then we get to hold you accountable.
I'll go next. Um, Innovation is only created when we have different voices, and listening to others, we'll pop ideas off of each other that get caught in silos. So no solutions have ever been solved alone. And if we keep the same voices in the same tables, we'll never be back on track to be the great place we're supposed to be. Um, I appreciate having the different generations and hearing from and learning from each one. So incorporating diversity as in the different generations, races, cultures, not making what I know as a norm to be a norm and finding out from others.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the equity piece really stands out to me because when we talk about equity, we're really talking about access. We're talking about actually creating system change that allows for more of the diverse voices, the diverse points of view, the diverse experiences to actually have a role to play rather than just being a mechanism for conversation. We really need to create the systems change that will allow for real progress to take place. And interestingly enough, this conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a new one. I'm old enough to remember these conversations that took place back in the late 70s. I was a part of that. We saw that, or rather, I saw that in the late 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, still having the same conversation today. And so it really begs the question, what kind of real change has taken place? And I think that the issue at the fulcrum of where change takes place happens at a systemic level, and that's where equity, in my estimation, really shines a light on that.
Okay. And Henry, this next question kind of plays to the point you just made. How important is it to not only have a diverse and inclusive company or organization, but also a diverse group of decision makers from within that company?
Well, are you talking about companies that are startups and small businesses, or are you talking about companies that represent corporate America?
I mean, really any company, but I feel like maybe in this instance, the larger companies, the corporate America type companies, investors, that type of thing.
Right. Well, without having, and to really chime in on what Rashawn was saying, without having these folks at the table, a diverse set of folks at the table, then you're really going to continue to mimic the thoughts, the ideas, the policies of folks that see the world in a narrow manner and have a narrow scope. So I think it's important to not just really have diversity for diversity's sake, but as Kimberly was saying, look at the possibility that diversity can improve company performance, can improve the value that a company actually has in the market, and then more broadly can improve the economic stability and vitality of the country on a whole.
You know, I absolutely agree. Just to sort of piggyback off of what Henry is saying, it's extremely important to have diversity in the decision-making process, so at the top. But for me, it's not just about having one seat at the table. I think we need multiple seats at the table. I think there needs to be an equitable distribution of power. And here's why. So a lot of times the decision makers are making decisions based on what they know or based on preconceived notions of other communities, their abilities to do things or the lack thereof. So if you cannot identify with my community when it comes to business ownership, entrepreneurship, access to capital, technology, healthcare, education, you're not going to make those decisions with me in mind. And so this is why we need communities. We cannot do this alone. One person at the table can have impact. One person can make small changes, but it takes an army to create, to impact generations and to create legacy wealth, just as other communities have been able to do that have access to a lot of resources that Black and Brown communities don't have.
Yeah, to finally, I want to add that if you only see someone, a person of color in a service position, when I come to apply to a software engineer position and you don't know that I'm already introverted, so I may be shy but a genius, I'm not going to get the chance to have the job because you have no idea what kind of personality or what kind of talents that I have because I haven't gotten past the humanness of being me. It's we're often not okay with not knowing. And so if you don't know a Black man is capable of being introverted, then you won't hire him to sit in the back office to do introverted work that you would assume that other races can do.
Okay. How do we, as a whole, how do we get to that point where because, and I've spoken with all of you previously, I've talked to a lot of Black and Brown innovation leaders in Charlotte, and the thing I hear over and over is the people at the table are the people who look like the ones who are already at the table. So how do we get to the point where that does change? What needs to happen?
Again, it's an old boss of mine said to me years ago that you have policymakers and you also have decision makers, right? So the decision makers oftentimes are the ones that act on the policy that's developed at the in the boardrooms and that's developed within the C-suite. And those folks that are in those positions at the C-suite level, in the boards, the shareholders, they really need to reflect the kind of diversity that we're talking about. It can't happen otherwise because and again, I go back to this notion of systemic change. The only way that that's going to really occur is if we have new policies, right? And for new policies to happen, we need to have fresh blood, fresh thinking, fresh ideas, and fresh points of view. And so I think that the underlying issue for most companies is their bottom line. And if we can demonstrate, and it has been demonstrated, that diversity improves one's bottom line, then it stands to reason that expanding on this and creating new policies is going to improve the corporate health of a company.
Yeah, and you know, Henry, it's interesting you would say that because sometimes I often think in terms of when you see the data says that companies perform, and we still don't see a lot of these changes. I wonder if it goes much deeper than that. And here's why I say it. You know, to me, to create this space allows individuals the freedom to sort of express themselves, their talents, even their cultural differences. And I think being able to create this space where we can feel like that we're more than just a number or a quota or a token or even a paycheck, but that we're truly vested in building this company because not only are we, because our communities and our families are tied to this, to the success of this. So what I pour into your company and what you pour into me has an impact over my families, my communities, my neighborhoods. So many times, sometimes I look at sort of a parallel difference. Like I spent 21 years at the Postal Service, many aspects, entry level, management level, and when it comes to automation, I always talk about this in analogy that you could just flip on a switch and the mail would just run. It's going to run seamlessly until there's a paper jam. When there's a paper jam, there are two alternatives. You can call in maintenance and they can shut the machine down, which stops the progress and fix it, or they can reroute it and let that mail continue running. At some point, there has to be some paper jams because this system goes so deep that it's almost second nature. It goes so deep and it's been running the same way for so many years that until there are some paper jams and some people who stand up and say, hey, we've got to see this different. And then we need to hold you accountable for creating these types of policies and processes that continue to hold, in many cases, Black and Brown people back. So we've got to, I mean, that may be a little bit of a crazy analogy, but because it runs so well and it's been running so well for so long and it goes so deep, there has to be, to have real impact, there has to be, there has to be some disruption in this machine.
I think
know,
that's a great analogy, actually.
And,
we
and
have to be
the
uncomfortable.
notion, I'm sorry, Rashawn, go ahead.
I was saying we have to be uncomfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes.
And no one wants to be they don't want to be the first. Sometimes it's even culturally, we are afraid that if we recommend someone and they don't perform to our standards, that they'll embarrass the whole race because we're often looked at as a monolith, and we're not. And so just being okay with I'm the only locked head woman in the boardroom and I'm sitting in the corner. Do I speak out or do I be quiet? If something happens, why am I the only voice that's saying, well, one, that's not your solution, is not your problem. We have to, as a community, be okay with going into these spaces, being uncomfortable, and bringing others with us.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other thing that that Kim was saying is that the process runs efficiently, and therefore it continues with it has this sort of continuity of operation, and I think that in some respects we really do have to question whether or not it is as efficient, as it could be, right? If we were to have true diversity and inclusion, we might find that things are even more productive and even more efficient, right? Because the way things have operated doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best way in which they can operate.
Okay. All right. This next question is geared more toward Rashawn, based on your work with, excuse me, Black Tech Interactive. But what can parents, peers, and community leaders do to nurture the next generation of tech talent?
Meet them where they are. We've done some collaborations this past week. We went live on Instagram, working with some other organizations to get out the tech opportunities, understanding that as people, we have the opportunities, don't get discouraged, and be more mentors and encouraging. We're having an event where we're going to bring the community together to learn about tech talent, job fairs, where it's going to be engaging and interactive. And so as a culture and a community, we have a rhythm about ourselves that we need to be okay with and pass that on to the generations that follow us. So we are planning a 3-day Afrofuturism Fest to incorporate everything from cultivating jobs to understanding how to be in the coding space. We call it coding and switching because you often do have to be, your mental health depends on being able to still code switch, and helping the younger generations navigate that and bringing them in the room, mentioning if someone's hiring, sending out text messages to your kids and your family, telling them to tell their friends, and being in the schools, really engaging and being intentional about meeting each generation where they are.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and also just want to chime in about this Afrofuturism Fest that we're planning, and it's also about creating this collision of techies and entrepreneurs and thinkers and designers and makers and so forth, so that we can really imagine a different kind of future for ourselves, rather than just continually rely upon others' notions of what our future ought to be. And in a lot of instances, that future is one that doesn't really serve us well. We need to be incorporating and utilizing the imagination and innovation that lies within, and look at that and the intersection of that with technology, and what that means for not just our future but our present as well.
Okay. I do want to pause real quick and just remind the audience that in about 20 minutes, we will be going to an audience Q&A session with our panelists. So if you do have any questions, drop those in the chat box. All right. And so kind of back to the same topic, how has the focus of nurturing tech talent changed across different generations?
Well, it has changed. Technology has changed so much. And we have to realize that if you don't see it, you can't be it. And just like I've watched Just Her Ride Share fight for dollars in Charlotte and try to look across the world for something that is needed, but it's always well, don't we already have a ride share, but there are 12 different breads in the aisles, but nobody ever questions the fact that you can have different options. So I want to make sure that as the generations go, there is still mentoring and uplifting and making sure that you are following your dreams, your mission. It's not easy being an entrepreneur. And so if you're always getting no's, just having the different generations tell you how to get a yes or help you get a yes, or having investors or someone to talk to, social capital is so important. If we can find a way that social capital is always invested into each generation, then we'll be better. And also not putting each generation down. Like if you don't know something about something, be okay with asking and teaching each other.
Okay.
And I think that's super important that Rashawn said that, because when I started on this journey a little over a year ago as a non-technical founder, now I like to say I'm a minimal technical founder because learning technology at my age was like learning Chinese, and I'm not going to give away my age here, but I will tell you there were some challenges. But I believe exposure, because I never knew that I could develop a love for technology at my age, and I could oversee and manage and learn, even though I don't do a lot of the coding and programming. I have a working knowledge of my product. I know what pushes this and that. And at my age, to be able to explore, it's imperative that we open up these doors for the younger generations, because we know that's where we're going globally. And I think for me, it's exposure. And I think it's exposure at different levels and different generations as well.
And Rashawn, you mentioned social investment. I want to talk a little bit about, the financial investment piece, which, has often been a struggle for minority founders in not just Charlotte, but all over. Kim, you as a Black female founder, what has it been like for you to try to, raise money and just, raise interest about your company? We were talking about you pitching before we actually went live. Tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like for you.
Humbling, emotional. As a business owner of over 20 years, my husband and I, with companies in engineering consulting, logistics, customer support, I spent a lot of years on the QA side and building. I know what it's like to work on the customer support, which was very dear to me. But we always bootstrapped our own businesses. So when I started raising capital, it was different. And it was, I had a lot of emotions going through my head, like, from, asking people to write checks to literally begging people to write checks. But what stood out to me the most, Elise, that was eye-opening and awakening, was the fact that in our communities, because we have the lack of access to capital, in comparison to other communities, I can look at, for example, one of my counterparts who may have an idea, and it may not even be a great idea, but just an idea, and can go and get access to funding. And Dr. Shante Williams said this the other day, and I love how she put it, and have the freedom to fail. That doesn't apply to our communities. We're held to a higher standard. And when we do fail, we're looked at as if we didn't have what it took, that we have the lack of ability to grow a company, when in fact, we have some of the most creative, talented group of people that I've ever seen on the face of the earth. And we can do it, but we just don't have the same access. And if I hear another person say, go do a friends and family round, I'm going to lose my mind. The next time that someone says that to me, I'm going to say, okay, lend me your friends and family and we'll see if that works. But seriously, it's been a struggle, but I'm determined. Like, we're resilient. We're a resilient group of people, in particular as women, Black founders. So I'm going to make it work, or I'm going to die trying. So, but it's been really tough.
I would.
Again, this gets back to the, what I've been saying all along about, this sort of the need for systemic change, and how the structures that have grown up around capital since, ever since, right? Those things are baked in. The disadvantages that we experience as a people are baked in. And so, in spite of the individual efforts on the part of entrepreneurs to, kick the door in, make their case before investors, that's not enough, right? We need to really reimagine and, as to borrow Kim's term, disrupt the structures that have led to the kind of disparities that we see in it's not about access to capital. It's really about acquiring that capital, right? Or being able to have that capital available to us. And that requires some systemic change. That requires some systems change. And that's really the thing that I'm curious about and concerned with in this, this post George Floyd moment that we're that we're all in, is whether or not the intention is there for that to happen, or are we going, or is the rubber band going to snap back to, where it always has been? And that means that we're just going to have to go through this cycle over and over again, and really not live up to the full promise that we can be again as a country, by not having, by not being able to fund a company like Kim's.
I have one question from the audience I want to take now because it pertains to what we're directly talking about. And that is, the person says, I'm not sure I've heard of social capital before. Can you explain it more to me, please?
Oh, Henry, you go.
Well, when you think of social capital, you're really thinking of who are those folks that can open doors, open opportunities, make those opportunities available to you. And typically that's a reflection of your network, right? And oftentimes our network is those of us who are on this call here, on this panel. Our networks typically reflect folks that we're familiar with. But one of the things that social capital does, and this is what, with City Startup Labs, we emphasize this as one of the assets that we like to build. And what that does is that it opens up the opportunity for folks to be in spaces, to have conversations, to have introductions to people that they otherwise would not have. So, if we were to extend that just a little further, the social capital that would be available to Kimberly would allow her to have more access to VCs and angel investors and the like, right? So that is a piece that really is oftentimes missing for again, Black and brown founders.
All right. And Henry, going back to what you were just talking about the the snapback of this conversation surrounding D&I. In this latest, and for some people, newfound interest in supporting Black and brown founders and startups, is this different and sustainable than in the past? Or do you think that things will kind of move back toward the way it has been?
Well, I will remain skeptical about this, right? Because I've heard this tune before. I've seen this movie before. I'm reminded, again, old enough to know this, that in post-civil rights movement, there are any number of programs that came out of that were to essentially assuage the concerns of our folk, and go move to the Nixon administration, where there was a lot of conversation about Black entrepreneurship and Black capitalism and all of that. And really, during that era, the gap between the wealth gap between Black and brown family, or I should say Black and white families, right, has increased significantly since that period, right? So we have seen in the last several years, or last couple of decades, this gnawing gap that is widened from that period where there was so much of a hue and cry around what we need to do in order to develop Black capitalism and Black entrepreneurship. We have not seen that gap narrow. We've seen it widen, so much so that it will take us longer than the time that Black folks were in slavery in order to close that gap between Black and white families. So this is where we're at right now, and I think it's all been exacerbated, as a matter of fact, with COVID, where we've seen, almost a hollowing out of a lot of our small businesses. So I remain skeptical. I'm hopeful that this is a different moment, but again, I've heard this tune before.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Henry was saying because he said something so powerful. Because I was optimistic, and now I'm a little skeptical because of my experience. Having access to capital is very different than someone cutting you a check or writing a check. And many times investors don't realize that even $10,000 or 5,000 or 15,000, even small amounts can make a difference in some Black founders' business. So, again, I'm a little skeptical as well, especially when I meet with investors who have the ability to write a check and tell me that they love what I'm doing, there's space for what I'm doing, but then they send me to another investor when you have the ability to make that impact. That says to me that, yeah, we're doing a lot of talking, but we need to see some actual progress in this area. So access to it and getting, the funding that we need is still a challenge.
Real life. I don't know why Henry started a nonprofit. So
If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't. That way.
and I discourage all Black women not to ever start nonprofits because it's not a sustainable livelihood. You can't really give your children the opportunities that only money can buy. So when charities go in and they say, "Oh, I'm gonna take you out of town because you've never been any place," how about you pay their mothers a decent wage and then we won't have to worry about that, or invest in their companies, whether they're starting a bakery or fix cars. There's always some entrepreneurial ventures going on in the communities that we know as the Crescent. There's plenty of genius there that we're not investing in because it's not your unicorn.
So we have talked a lot today about, what hasn't changed and what needs to change. But let's talk about how the conversation around DE&I has evolved.
Well, I think that in part we're having this conversation, right? So that is, to some extent or another, we're it's a thing, right? Charlotte Inno is having this conversation. So 5 years ago, we would not have had this conversation. So it is a thing, and I think that is some semblance of progress. But as the old adage goes, the proof is in the pudding. So I hate to put that sort of spin on it, but I remain skeptical, as I said.
Yeah, but that's where accountability comes in, Henry. There are a lot of organizations, corporations that are implementing. So definitely optimistic for having the conversation, for creating these departments, for taking a closer look. In fact, I have friends who have been placed in high positions to sort of lead, these areas. But then it becomes accountability. It's not where we create this space and we talk about it for a year and it doesn't, that goes back to the long lasting impact that I talk about. Because that's what's going to change generations. It's not a feel good moment or because we're sort of in this climate where everyone wants to do something, we can show you how it needs to be done. And then we sort of put the accountability back on you and we look at the data and say, hey, are you doing this or what have you done? And yeah, we get to hold you accountable and that's how you make the change. But yeah, it's no longer about the conversations. We have to put these systems in place that has long lasting impact in our communities.
All right. And so I do want to get to the audience questions a little bit early. We have two really fantastic ones, so I want to give all of you, enough time to answer them. This first one is, I consistently hear from corporate procurement teams that they can't find diverse, innovative businesses, especially in the STEM and manufacturing areas. Do the panelists agree with this statement? We'll start there. Do you agree with that statement?
I'm gonna go first. My mom had a washable, reusable face mask in 2013. A whole manufacturing company in Hawaii, no investment, no capital. They're not looking for these companies. They're not investing in these companies. And until we are really intentional about finding them, then yeah, they're going to say the same lie. I've never gotten a job by applying through one of those black hole systems. Never. It's always been about who I called or who I know or who knew me back from when, and then the referral. Even starting a business, I've always worked through referrals. So until we are really intentional about reaching out, then they're going to need to use the same excuse that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and it is an excuse. I don't know if it's an intentional excuse, but it's not true. It's absolutely not true. I have met some of the most brilliant, innovative, creative, uh, technology-minded, tech-savvy people in our communities that, because there are preconceived notions that we do not have the ability to perform in these spaces, that we're often overlooked. But trust me, it is absolutely not true. And if you have the power to change a generation of people that you may think doesn't have the ability to do it, create that space for them so that we can do it. So yeah, I don't buy it. It's not true.
And again, it goes back to policy. If the and I'm not speaking in terms of policy around quotas or anything of that sort. It is we must, as a company, do better in terms of finding folk rather than laying back on our laurels or tapping into the existing network that we already have. We need to not be lazy in terms of how we go about identifying good talent and good suppliers, good vendors. They exist, and if they don't necessarily exist in the form and fashion that you are looking for, what about as a company you put forth the effort to help folks meet the criteria that you're looking for? If your contract can help a company get across that finish line, it's done all the time otherwise, right? Why can't it be done in these instances? If that can help, then now you're creating a larger pool of diverse suppliers. So I think a lot of times it's just a matter of folks being lazy and not really doing the hard work that's necessary to find this great talent that does exist.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean make us check a box to say that we're Black women only. That's some
Exactly.
crap. It's like, I already know I'm Black and I'm woman owned. Give me the contract regardless, not because it's like, oh, I need to use 20% of my expenses on a Black or woman owned business.
Yes, and the same standard, the same measure with different communities. Make sure that we're not held to a certain standard that defeats us before we start. If you're going to hire someone who may have a lack in sort of an expertise area, but you're going to train them and get them up, like Henry was saying, then give us the same opportunities to do so. Don't just take away the opportunity um, because you have to maybe help us a little, train us a little, sort of steer us in the right direction. So yeah, I agree.
And it's really the context around all of this is important. I often say that, we came here with a tailwind, and we've been facing a headwind ever since, right? So if we were able to, if again, policy change, systems change, structural change, remove the handicap, right? Then we'd be able to, have, a wide array of businesses across, the entire spectrum of categories that, folks claim that they can't seem to find, viable and adequate suppliers for. I think we need to really get to how do we bridge that gap, and that's the thing that companies can do in their own right. Particularly if a company is all about, hey, listen, we believe in the free market. Well, then allow that gap to be closed and see. James Brown said it well. I don't want nobody to give me something. Just open up the door and I'll get it myself, right? So the fact that the door is not opened, and then when the door is open, you trip me while I'm going through the door, then that sets up a paradigm that it's consistently and generationally hard to overcome.
All right, next one is, from a recruiting perspective, can you help me understand or give suggestions on where we can post for openings that will enable us to get more diverse applicants and hires?
HBCUs, stop assuming everyone has a computer. So if you only post on Indeed and my cell phone is my only way to apply, there's already going to be a barrier. The local church, Black Tech Charlotte, we do that. We post, we work with companies to help them find talent. Like I said, we'll go live with you on our Instagram and LinkedIn pages, because we have an audience. So just being innovative about Snapchat, using social media more for recruiting than it is to communicate for socializing.
And also, there are several platforms that are available. And this is why I say there's no excuse. In particular, one that I'm a part of that's called Hire Black. You don't have to be Black to subscribe to the platform. It just gives you a variety of talent there. And so there are categories from every different area. And from what I've seen, that posting your resumes and supporting people, helping them with interview processes and things like that. But there are places out there where you can find the talent. You just have to be willing to go get it, to go find it. So.
And one of our partners, Blacks in Technology, has a Charlotte chapter, and they're very, very intentional about helping to pipeline Black tech talent for companies that are looking for for these sorts of employees. So that's a resource that's right here, and please make use of it.
And be human about it. I had a friend from Atlanta that came in to interview with one of our major companies. It was Friday. She was dressed up, and I said, "You are not going to get that job." And she was like, "No, like this is what we do." I said, "You out weighing on too many clothes." So when she came back, she was like, the guy that interviewed her had on jeans and flip flops, and it was just like she was prepared for what was traditionally an interview apparel, but not knowing like the company and the culture, and saying that like come in as accepting us as our authentic selves. When I applied for jobs, I put my hair up because it's like I don't want anybody judging me based on my hair, and it's still a thing. And it's like, why my hair grows out like it does? Why is it not okay? So just go to the beauty parlor, have friends of other races. It's social capital again. It's calling your homegirls and saying, I've got this job, and letting us connect with other people. You can contact me. I'm always open.
Can each of you share a few ways that you have found that work to increase awareness of unconscious bias and help avoid its negative influence on recruiting, hiring, and other business decisions?
Ooh, a few ways.
Repeat that again.
This person is interested in ways that you have found to increase awareness about unconscious bias and help avoid its negative influence.
Real conversation for me, full transparency. I always go back to full transparency. Listen, we're all different. We were all created different, but we're more alike than we are different when you get to the core of what things really are. So if you have questions about certain things that you have not experienced in your human experience, let's have a conversation about it. I think what happens is when we try to avoid these real conversations about our differences, that's where we go wrong. Because if you, again, lack of talent, lack of ability to operate in these spaces, not true. So if you want to know like where to find this, this talent, or if you want to even know how to relate to a certain community, ask us. Like we'll help you. Like we'll let you know, because again, we're here to build community. And most of us not only want to build community within our own communities, but we know that we're not confined to one community. We want to build community with all communities because we as a people believe in diversity. Like that's one thing about our community that I know for a fact, that we, even though we want to build our own communities, we always have a need to want to build other communities as well. Other communities are not always like that toward us, but we are, at least from my experience. So I think conversation, full transparency, and talking about real biases, because we all have them, but we can discuss them and tackle them head on.
Yeah, and the late great David Dinkins, former mayor of New York City, mentioned that we are a wonderful mosaic. We often think of America as a melting pot, but actually it's really more of a mosaic, right? And if you look at a mosaic, each of those pieces is distinct, it's unique, and yet when you kind of pull back from that that picture, you see the image that comes forth. And I think that if we thought about this from the point of view of say the folks that are on that are astronauts, right? And they look back and they see this beautiful planet, they don't see all of the tumult that happens. They just see a beautiful, glowing a pearl of a planet. And I think that oftentimes that's the perspective that we kind of need to bring to not just these conversations, but how we perceive ourselves in the world, right? Where and if that's done, then irrespective of the points of view or the biases, et cetera, a lot of that can kind of melt away when we realize that we are all really in this together. Yeah. And I think that that's a good place to to operate from.
I'll say that I go into it always on the positive. So, like I said, I knew my friend wasn't going to get the job based on how she was dressed, but knowing that other opportunities will come, and learning from the experiences and hoping that people will not just judge my facial expressions because I have them, as a deterrent from communicating with me, or assuming that because I might laugh loud or I might not be a morning person. Like, so being empathetic about other people and how we're human. Like, I have a bad day, but that doesn't mean like I don't want to be here. So just approaching it as humans, how would you treat people like you want to be treated ultimately?
Yeah. Well, Cory Booker uses this this term that I really like, courageous empathy, to kind of follow on what you were saying, Rashawn. You know, have that empathy, courageous empathy. You know, and so, hey, maybe that's what we all need to employ, some courageous empathy, from the C-suite and the boardroom all the way down to the mailroom.
I like that a lot, and I think that's a great place for us to stop today. Henry, Kim, Rashawn, thank you all so much for being here with us. This was a great conversation. I hope that the three of you, you know, got as much out of it as I feel like I did, and hopefully the audience did. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. Make sure you guys stay up to date with Charlotte Inno by subscribing to The Beat and checking our website. I will have a recap of today's event up on Charlotte Inno later this week, so check that out as well. And that's a wrap for today. I hope everybody has a great day and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Elise. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.